Blah, 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 blah. Hi, my name is Millie. I'm a third year student at Jesus College studying PBS, which stands for Psychological and Behavioural Sciences.
Great. Can you tell us a bit more about your course?
Yeah, so PBS is a 3-year course, and each year you do 2 mandatory modules and 2 optional modules. So the optional modules include things like philosophy, economics, natural sciences, sociology, things like that. And the mandatory modules change each year. So in first year, that is research methods and an introduction to psychology. In second year, that's experimental psychology, social psychology, and developmental psychology. And in third year, that's a research dissertation, which is pretty flexible.
What's your dissertation on?
So my dissertation this year is on cognitive reserve and how that can mediate the relationship between aging and episodic memory decline. A bit complicated, but...
Nice. And can you tell us which A-levels you did and which ones you recommend people do if they want to apply for PBS at Cambridge?
Yeah, so I did mathematics, computer science and psychology, and I did an EPQ in physics, because I originally took that as a 4th A-level, but it got a bit too much, so I dropped it and did EPQ instead. Generally, colleges have like preference subjects that they want psychology students to take. So usually biology, chemistry or maths, or a combination of those. You don't really need to do psychology because they're understanding that not every school teaches psychology, so that's never normally a requirement. Jesus didn't require anything, so the fact that I hadn't done biology didn't really matter too much. I'd recommend biology and maths are good, but PBS is quite interdisciplinary, so me coming from more of like a computer science background, more of like a physics background, was completely fine. But some colleges would prefer you to come from like a biology, chemistry background. So it can inform your choice on college, definitely.
And I guess the college websites tell you which ones to recommend?
Yeah, definitely. So they either say these ones are mandatory or they say we prefer these subjects.
Okay, great. And what was your Cambridge offer then?
So my Cambridge offer was A-star AA, and that's pretty standard for a psychology offer. It doesn't usually go above that. So yeah, pretty standard.
And did you end up getting your offer? What happened there?
So I did miss my offer in the end. I got 3 A's and then an A-star in my EPQ, whereas I needed the A-star in psychology. But I was only 1 mark off, and I came from like a state school and had various like contextual information taken into account. So I did get a place anyway. So there are now 3 students in my year for psychology, whereas usually there's only 2.
And can you tell us what a PBS personal statement should be like?
Yeah, so a PBS personal statement can be very different depending on what background you've come from. So a lot of people come from it from like a philosophical background or very, very biological. I've also seen statements that are like based on criminology. So it can be very different. But I would generally show like a focus on the core themes of psychology, show that you're like aware of debate and the general literature, show that you've done the reading around like particular topics of interest. So I read a lot of Oliver Sacks because I was quite interested in like face perception and disorders and hallucinations and things like that. And obviously mention any like awards or scholarships or things, essays you've written and things like that.
Great. And can you tell us what your interview was like?
Yeah, so my psychology interview was quite scary, I think. I had 2 interviews. One was more like a critical thinking interview. It wasn't really based around psychology at all. So I had to do like a logic puzzle and look at some graphs and interpret those. One of the puzzles was about like 2 people being married, and I had to like figure out. It was really weird. And then the other interview was like a debate interview, so it was very much just like talking back and forth, having a discussion about various questions they raised. So one of the questions I got asked was, should we eat human meat? And they gave an example of if someone had like died in a family, is it immoral, and in what defines morality? And my director of studies, who's like the person who is in your college for your subject, who like guides you throughout your course, she's very much into like morality research. So I think the director of studies in your interviews can very much guide your PBS interview. So that was what mine was based around, but definitely like look up who your director of studies is and who your interviewer is to see which direction they might take the interview in.
And then what would you recommend people to do if they want to prepare for their Cambridge interview for PBS?
Yeah, I think reading is probably the best thing to do for PBS because a lot of it is to do with understanding the literature and the debate and the core themes. I personally prepared by basically drawing a massive mind map and thinking of every single theme they could possibly mention. So like law, politics, ethics, morals, criminology, all of these things, biology, like genetic modification, everything I could possibly think of, and try to put it in a psychological context. And that helped me prepare because when I got the question that was like, oh, should we eat human meat? I wasn't as thrown off because I'd thought about morality in general so I could apply.
That sounds great. And then do you have any general just study tips?
I think psychology, if you're doing the A-level, it's so much based around like learning studies. And my main tip for that would be to actually read the original paper that was published as opposed to reading it in the book, like the textbook you're given, because often they miss out so many details and it's really hard to understand it just from reading it in the textbook. Another thing is like watch videos of the actual tasks that were carried out in some studies because that can help you actually understand what they're talking about.
Great. And you do quite a lot of access work. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so coming from like a state school and having a single mum household and like low income background, I've tried to do a lot of access stuff because I've noticed since coming here the barriers really do exist, and I maybe didn't see them before coming because I didn't know what I was missing out on. But now I'm here, I realise how many more resources there are for certain schools over others. So I work with something called Project Access, which is now called Slipstream Education. So if you think you might be eligible for that, definitely, and you're like an A-level student, I recommend going on the website. They like hook you up with a mentor in your subject and they'll like help you prepare for interviews and personal statements and things like that. And yeah, I generally offer like free interview/subject advice to anyone who's from that background.
That's great. And you were talking about your Sutton Trust scholarship?
Yes, so like a similar kind of access stuff. So I wasn't involved in any Cambridge access stuff in sixth form, but I was involved with the Sutton Trust, which is like a Fulbright program, which is for like the similar kind of backgrounds, so low income and things like that, who got good GCSEs. And I was on the United States track, which meant I was actually like being helped to go to American schools, like Ivy League schools, but in the end I changed to the UK track, which meant I was like preparing for Cambridge. And again, they're an amazing organisation, so if you're kind of from that background, I would recommend looking them up as well. And I'm sure you can put something in the description to link people to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all the questions I have for you, but if you have any final remarks or anything like that, or just talk about your general Cambridge experience, then feel free to do so.
Yeah, so I've very much liked my Cambridge experience, very much. Lots of societies, and it's been really, really fun. I don't really want to leave, so I might stay for a master's. So we'll see how that goes.